This is Nicolás Maduro, the former president of Venezuela. For 12 years, he ruled a country with the largest oil reserves on Earth. Now, he sits in a New York City jail cell, awaiting trial. Captured by American Special Forces in a spectacular nighttime operation. Under his rule, a nation with unlimited oil resources transformed into a failed state. But to understand this collapse, we must go back in time, to an era when Venezuela was a symbol of wealth and hope. Decades ago, Venezuela was considered the premier oil nation of Latin America, a country overflowing with black gold. Caracas was a booming capital, skyscrapers, luxury cars, a strong currency. Then, oil prices fell, and the economy began to collapse. It has never recovered. Over 4/5 of Venezuelans struggle in extreme poverty. Water and electricity shortages are constant. Millions have fled the country. Unemployment and crime are among the highest in the world. Venezuela has also become a major hub for illegal trafficking, sending prohibited substances to Mexico, Europe, and the United States. And that is the contradiction, because at the beginning, Venezuela inspired enormous hope. In the early 20th century, oil was discovered in Venezuela, one of the most valuable resources on Earth. Foreign oil corporations rushed to the region. Within a decade, Venezuela entered the global market, extracting oil on a massive scale. In the 1920s and 1930s, the world realized something extraordinary. Venezuela possessed the largest oil reserves on the planet, estimated at over 300 billion barrels. At that time, global markets required roughly 1 million barrels each day. Officials in Caracas believed financial constraints would become a thing of the past, so the government began to spend lavishly. Grand resorts, towering buildings, lavish venues. By mid-century, the country embodied wealth and extravagance. Hard to believe today, but back then, it lived the dream of every country. Money, for almost nothing. But problems were emerging over 6,000 miles away, in another oil-dependent region. In October of 1973, Syrian and Egyptian forces attacked Israel. The Yom Kippur War began. The conflict didn't achieve its territorial objectives, but what truly mattered was something else entirely. The resulting oil embargo changed everything. OPEC imposed sanctions on countries supporting Israel: the United States, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands. Led by Saudi Arabia, Middle Eastern producers triggered the first oil crisis in history. Prices rose 70% in a single day. Even after the war ended, prices remained high. And Venezuela benefited the most. It had oil, and no geopolitical restrictions. It sold freely. To the United States, to Israel, to anyone with the cash to pay. So where was the disaster? In the details. The 1970s became Venezuela's golden decade. Money flooded in. The country drowned in cash. And when you have money, you spend more. Even governments do. Venezuela spent aggressively. Massive infrastructure projects began. Roadways, major bridges, processing facilities, whole urban centers. Government leaders unveiled an ambitious transformation program. Oil wealth would transform the nation into a regional powerhouse. But ambition grew faster than discipline. Government agencies multiplied. Public servants received massive compensation. Ministries competed for scale and prestige. foreign debt increased. But nobody worried. Oil was expensive. The dollar was cheap. It created an illusion of wealth, and dependence on oil deepened. Ironically, the more Venezuela earned, the less it saved. And just as the world waited for the oil bubble to burst, fate intervened one last time. Look at the oil reserve rankings. First, Venezuela. Second, Saudi Arabia. Third and fifth, Iran and Iraq. Now consider what happens when two major oil exporters enter into conflict. Oil prices surged again. Venezuela benefited once more, unaffected by Middle Eastern conflict. But luck never lasts. By the mid-80s, oil prices plummeted to earlier levels. Saudi Arabia abandoned production quotas. They flooded the market. Prices crashed, and global economies followed. The impact on Venezuela proved devastating. Oil accounted for over 90% of exports. The state could no longer pay salaries or benefits. Borrowing delayed the collapse, but debt ballooned. Under President Jaime Lucinchi, austerity was declared. The printing presses started running. Newly printed currency flooded the economy. Inflation exploded. By the late 90s, inflation hit triple digits. By the turn of the century, a third of the population faced destitution. The nation that was once rich now stood on the edge. The people decided it was time for change. Time for revolution. In the early 1990s, a young army officer named Hugo Chávez emerged. He saw corruption, inequality, misery. In 1992, he attempted a military coup. It failed. Chávez was imprisoned for 2 years. In 1994, a new president pardoned him, hoping to calm public anger. Free again, Chávez left the army and entered politics. In 1998, he won the presidency, becoming the youngest president in Venezuelan history. He immediately began reshaping the country. A new constitution, one of the longest in the world, and the nationalization of oil. The state regained control of PDVSA, the national oil company. Oil revenues were redirected to the people. At first, it worked. Oil prices rose, billions flowed in. Chávez expanded social spending, education, healthcare, housing, free food. Millions felt the state cared for them. But foreign companies resisted. ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, they left. Lawsuits followed. Production efficiency collapsed. Infrastructure aged. Investment fled. Chávez rode the same horse as before, oil. And he was lucky. In the 2000s, oil prices exploded, reaching $150 per barrel in 2008. That luck defined his legacy. But this was the peak. Chávez ruled as an authoritarian, suppressing opposition, changing election rules. In 2011, he was diagnosed with cancer. In 2012, his condition worsened. He named his successor, Nicolás Maduro. After Chávez's death, Maduro won narrowly, with 50.6% of the vote. He was unknown, inexperienced, a former bus driver, a union activist. And then, disaster struck again. Oil prices collapsed. Inflation returned. Then, hyperinflation. The government printed money. The bolívar disintegrated. People carried cash in bags. Prices changed daily. Protests erupted. They were crushed. Sanctions followed. Oil embargoes devastated the economy. By 2018, inflation reached 1,700%. Over 7 million people fled the country. Oil production fell to a 50-year low. But Maduro survived. Smuggling replaced trade. Gold replaced currency. In 2019, opposition leader Juan Guaidó declared himself interim president. Standing before thousands in Caracas, he invoked the Constitution. The United States recognized him immediately. Then Canada, Brazil, Colombia, over 50 countries backed Guaidó. It seemed Maduro's days were numbered. But the military stayed loyal. The coup failed. Guaidó fled into exile. Maduro tightened control. Opposition leaders were arrested. Protests were crushed. Then came the global crisis. Oil demand collapsed. Production dropped to historic lows. Hyperinflation reached unimaginable levels. The bolivar became worthless. Maduro made a desperate decision. He legalized the dollar. The socialist revolution's ultimate irony. American currency became the people's salvation. The revolution quietly ended, not with a bang, but with silent surrender. In November 2024, Donald Trump won the presidential election. Immediately after taking office, in January 2025, he ordered a naval blockade of Venezuela. American warships appeared off the coast, the most powerful naval deployment since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. A steel wall surrounding the nation. The stated objective: dismantle the trafficking networks, cut the drug routes to North America and Europe. But beneath the surface, something deeper is at play. Venezuela sits at the center of a new great game, a broken state, yet still strategically vital. Washington sees a threat. Beijing sees opportunity. Moscow sees an ally. This is about more than oil now. It's about influence, control, the future of Latin America. A country that once symbolized wealth and progress has become a warning to the world. Resources do not equal prosperity. Dependency breeds collapse, and those who suffer most are always the innocent. What happens next will shape the region for decades.